When I started thinking about my idea worth spreading in technology, entertainment, and design, I thought that my idea worth spreading is that ideas are worth spreading across the gender spectrum from a very young age. And you may look at me and think, isn't that what we do already? Let me ask you, can you listen as if you might be wrong? Is it possible that we actually unconsciously, selectively share ideas with different members depending on their gender? Let me explain a little bit about that. I'll first start off by telling you that I'll talk a lot about women in STEM. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And sometimes I'll talk about STEAM, which is you add the A in STEM, which is for the arts. But this whole title question is, from since I've been in my 20s, people have been saying, you don't look like an engineer. So that's my question of you. What exactly does an engineer look like? Can you close your eyes and picture that visual that comes to your mind when we say engineer? What is the gender? What is the age? What is the demographic, the color of their skin, their religion, their region? Go deeper. What is their emotional intelligence? What are their social skills? And what's their IQ? You got this picture, right? Let's expand that further. Do you have a picture of what a nurse looks like? What does a soldier look like? A ballet dancer, a physician? And let's think about that as we go deeper into this whole idea of gender inclusion. So one of the things that I've been talking about is #US2. And #US2 is what I'd like all of us to do is for decent and honorable women and men to work together to bridge this gap. And I love acronyms. So the way I've divided this bridge is in two parts. And the first part of that is what I'll talk about today, which is building and reinforcing inclusion, the B, R, and the I. But I've already spoken about the other piece of that, and that is destroying the guardrails of exclusion, which is reducing gender stereotyping and all the other isms. And it is my duty and my pleasure today to talk about the extraordinary things that my father, my mother, my grandfather, my family did to build and reinforce inclusion so that I was able to be a female engineer. So let me start with the first story. I'm 12 years old, I'm in India, and I'm in an all-girls convent school called Sacred Heart. And the nuns come to me and they say, the math teacher left. Unfortunately, you and the other two girls who want to study advanced mathematics are going to have to study biology. It's just not worth it for us to have a teacher for 3 students. I go home, I'm so disheartened. And I tell my parents, my father says nothing. Unbeknownst to me, he gets in his car and he goes to the boys' school, which is run by Jesuit priests. I don't know what's happening, but 1 week later, a male math teacher comes into my convent school, all girls, and for 3 years teaches the 3 of us. As a result of which, I'm able to take the JEE, which is the Joint Entrance Exam, for IIT, which is a world-class school in India. I get there, and when I get to IIT, I'm 16 years old, I look around, and there's me and 39 boys. And my first question is, where are all the girls? And that's really why I talk about this, about gender inclusion, because I think that there are certain things that impact that question. I don't think we understand the onslaught of the media on our gender norms, on what the movies say, what the TV tells us, the written word, the print, the avatars in video games, songs. And so, of course, when we recognize gender stereotyping, we say no tolerance. But what I'd like us to do is to build and reinforce inclusion when we see those groundbreaking movies, when they try to improve the gender gap. So let's talk about Black Panther. Black Panther shattered multiple stereotypes. First of all, the mythical country of Wakanda in Africa is completely different from what we have that picture in our mind from media. Wakanda is technologically advanced and rich. So that's right there, groundbreaking. But let's look at Princess Shuri. Princess Shuri. Remember you had that image of what an engineer looks like. What does a technological genius look like? The person that designs all those fast cars and gadgets and gizmos and James Bond movies and Marvel and Avenger and all that. What is the demographic? What is the color of the skin? What is everything about the technological genius? Now let's look at Princess Shuri, a young teenage girl from Africa. In one bold move, Disney redefined a highly value-laden term, princess. And to me, this is what we applaud. Let's look at the song. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. I make no apologies, sung by the gorgeous Kiala Settle in the movie The Greatest Showman. What about the grit that that movie emphasizes? So when we talk about grit, I've thought for a long time, I've looked at in nonprofit work, we've worked with hundreds and thousands of little girls, little boys across multiple aspects of careers. And I believe that success factors lie in this combination, which is grit that I just spoke about, gravitas, and then grace. And I'll go into detail about what each of those means. Let's talk about grit. And I want to give you the background of why grit is so critical. ASME, which is the Society of Mechanical Engineers, they did a study in 2012. And they found that there's some good news and bad news. Well, the good news is that since the 1980s, when the average percentage of females in engineering was less than 6%, so we've progressed a little bit. In 2012, the number of females in engineering schools was about 18%, give or take 2%. But what they found was, of that 18 to 20%, the number of female engineers that were working dropped down to 14%. So as I talk about grit, I want you to think about which of these aspects might have helped reduce that attrition. Make that 18 to 20% stay from being students into the workforce. So the 4 aspects I'd like to talk about are, first of all, guts. Just sheer courage, because that's so important. Because you're doing something non-traditional, and you really have to succeed when the chances are it's going to be difficult. But then the second piece of it has to do with resilience. I stand in front of you because I was laid off 6 years ago. And after the initial shock wore off, and our son said, you've always wanted to write a book, what are you waiting for? And I was like, what am I waiting for? And here I am 3 books later, just following the career of my dreams, because I was able to just pick myself up with the help of this amazing support system that I have. And then indifference. You may look at that word, indifference, and think that's not a good word. What does she mean, indifference? I'm not talking about indifference to doing the right thing. I'm talking about being indifferent to what people say. About society is going to consider me, oh my gosh, what will people say? Trust me, I know this one. I was a people pleaser for most of my early adult life. I wasted so much time just worrying about whether I offended someone or this or that, and I lost some of my strength. I've worked really hard, and I think I've achieved a difference. Let me tell you why I think that. My son recently gave me a pair of socks, and the socks read, "Hi, I don't care, thanks." I think maybe. Also have something in the kitchen on the island which says, "I could agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong." So that's indifference. And finally, tenacity. There's hard work, and sometimes these careers are tough. We're tougher. We just have to learn that we are from a young age and learn to fail. That's a gift we can give our children. Let them fail. Let them pull themselves up. Let them work hard. I don't think we let our children fail enough. And then we come to gravitas. I kept hearing that word, and I was like, what does that word mean? Gravitas comes from the word gravity, which has to do with weight. And really, literally, what it's talking about is the weight of your substance, the weight of your contribution, your work product, your output. And so I started thinking, what was it that this remarkable family, this structure did for me that built gravitas in me? And I suddenly had this mental flash. I'm in Kolkata, in India, in my grandfather's house. I'm 3 years old. And my grandfather is pouring tea. Let me also tell you about my grandfather. My grandfather was a world-famous scientist. He was a colloidal chemist. And he won the Padma Bhushan, the Order of the CBE, and he was president of the Indian Science Congress. But to me, he's just my grandfather. I'm 3 years old, and he's taking this beautiful silver teapot, and he's pouring out this hot tea into this lovely cup with the strainer. It's all very British and stately. And then he's adding a dollop of milk. And just as he's about to take these silver tongs and he's going to put a cube of sugar into the hot tea, he asks me, what's going to happen to this cube of sugar as I put it into the tea? And I am so excited at 3. Somebody's asking me this question. I have to think about that. And so proudly, little 3-year-old me answers and says, it's going to melt. Now here's the key point here. My grandfather doesn't say, oh wow, you're so smart, bravo, great job, you're so smart. Nothing. What he does is critical in building gravitas. He asks me an uptake question. And he says, okay, but what if that tea wasn't hot and I put the sugar into it? What would happen then? And what if instead of tea, there was oil in that cup? What would happen to the sugar then? And in that way, he signaled to me that I had gravitas, that my brain meant something. And it took me years. This is in the days before Google. I couldn't just look up the answers. So it took me years of studying and asking people questions to understand about molecular speeds and rapidity when temperatures rise and attraction between molecules. But I ask you, when is the last time that one of you have signaled gravitas to one of your little girls or boys? Have you taken them out on a sunny day and looked up at the clouds and said, hey, I wonder why the sky is blue? And then 2 days later, just gone outside and said, oh, it's raining today, and what happened to the color? Why is the sky gray? And we don't have to be STEM or STEAM experts. We get to just look it up on the internet these days and have the answer, or better still, just ask them and have them figure it out. And so when we move on to the third piece of it, which is grace, and I'm talking about this package of strength and of kindness. And I think we're in such a divisive world that we really are not kind enough both to others and to ourselves. And so that, I think, is one of the highlights of my life. Before Mother Teresa became Mother Teresa, she was a young Polish woman called Agnes Bojaku, and she came to Kolkata to become a Loreto nun. And so once she formed the order, she would come and visit her friends in the Loretos. And I was a student, I was a little girl in Loreto House, and I had the privilege of actually seeing Mother Teresa. And that grace, I can't define to you that spirit, the beauty of a living saint. That's kindness to others. But also what's very, very important is kindness to ourselves. And I think that's the one that we struggle with a lot. So what I'd like you to do is think about times when people say to us that we're not enough. We're the wrong gender, or the wrong skin color, or the wrong religion. We're not the right body weight. We're not the right this, that, X, Y, or Z. And I want us to do this, and I have found that this has worked well from children of a young age all the way up to people as old as me. And what I'd like us to do is just think about when all these things come at us, to reassure ourselves and believe that we are enough. So this is the mind-body tool that I'd like us to learn. Just we rub our hands vigorously like that, get it nice and warm, and then we place gentle, warm hands on our own hearts and we say, I am enough. And we do this 3 times. Like this, get it nice and warm, and we say to ourselves gently, I am enough. One more time. Nice and warm, feels good, huh? I am enough. And so as I close, what I'd like to do is, I've talked mostly about balance, about EQ plus IQ, about functional and behavioral skills, of strength and kindness. And I realized as I went deeper with this wonderful theme that this TEDx has, is that I am planted firmly because of the reinforcement and inclusion of 2 hemispheres. I am deeply rooted in the East, and my branches have blossomed in the West. So I'd like to close with a tribute to both. My last word will be namaste, and I want to explain what that means, because often it is misunderstood and overused. So literally, I used to study Sanskrit when I was a little girl. Namaste, literally what it means is, my spirit bows to the spirit that is in you. But I'm going to target that as I close to say that my spirit bows to the inclusive and kind and grace-giving spirit that is within you. And my tribute to the West is going to be a quote from Winston Churchill, who said, "Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak." And some days, it really does take courage. But what he also said, the powerful part of the quote, courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. And so I thank you for having had the courage today to sit down and listen. Namaste.